Hey everyone, welcome back to Security Unscripted. I'm Vincent Danon, and this time we're talking about vulnerabilities in software. Of course, my favorite thing to beat on, but more about like the risk that these scanners and tools kind of surface in your environment. Now, when we look at traditional scanners, they're looking for vulnerabilities in software. So they're effectively surfacing CVEs that are unfixed or patches that have been unapplied. But that doesn't necessarily speak to risk, right? Especially when we're looking at those unfixed or unpatched CVEs. And that paradigm has really shifted when we're looking at bare metal and virtual machines versus containers and the way that these things kind of operate and scan each other. So when we look at the axis vector for a lot of breaches, we're actually looking at the primary driver for that exploitation is not necessarily software vulnerabilities, right? Verizon's got is pretty much demonstrated this over a number of years with their data breach incident report. And I was talking to a fellow back at VulnCon earlier this year, and I've invited him on to talk to me about this because he's kind of working with a new wave of scanner, I'll call it. Although I know he disagrees with me and he can shed some light on that, but new ways of surfacing risk in our environments. So, Phil Moroni, welcome to Security Unscripted. Maybe introduce yourself real quick for the folks that are watching, and then we'll get into it.
Sure, I think that's a really good quick overview. But welcome myself. Hey, I'm Phil Moroni. I am the VP of Sales over here at Phoenix Security. Prior to joining, though, and prior to meeting you, Vincent, I think it's important the audience knows I was in consulting and kind of reselling in the advisory capacity of the industry for maybe 15, 16 years.
Okay.
And then I met the founder of Phoenix, and I was like blown away by what this guy was talking about, because everything that you just said ultimately, I think, comes down to how the world is changing, where people that are in IT positions need to start to speak business better. They need to speak in terms of risk. They need to speak in terms that other people inside the business understand versus, hey, we've got 1.4 million misconfigurations in our cloud environment, and it's like, what does that mean? What does that translate to? And
Yeah.
that's the thing that we're really trying to solve for over here is how do people have more effective conversations around this stuff? How do they communicate around digital risk and what that means to a business? And so I joined up to lead sales here.
Nice. Well, thanks for being on. And actually, one of the things that you said is something that's I say it's almost haunted me for years. And I remember the very first B sides that we had here in Edmonton, Alberta. A fellow, I can't even remember his name, did the keynote, and the thing that you talked about literally blew me away. And I'd been doing security at that time for 15 years or so. And he said the problem with security practitioners today is that they don't, like as you say, speak in that business language, right? So he was talking about how somebody would come in and basically throw a binder on the desk. We have all these problems. Here's a technical analysis. It's like I literally have no idea what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how to solve for it. And
Mm-hmm.
so the whole premise of his talk was like security practitioners have to learn to speak business risk because it's the business risk that you're mitigating being exposed via like these security controls or lack of security controls and vulnerabilities that exist. But at the end of the day, we all run businesses. And so it's the business risk where some of this stuff is acceptable because the alternative is actually riskier for the business. And it sounds like the sort of work that you're doing kind of does that. So maybe you could describe like what does that kind of look like tangibly, like in the product that you guys are working on
Sure.
overall.
I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to come at this sort of a problem. First off, I think there's a number of people out there that are focused on answering this question and these questions in similar ways to what my company's doing. It just happens to be that we're just a little bit further along in the journey of that. What it looks like, in my opinion, is first off, you got to have a dashboard that makes sense for people to understand what's going on,
Mhm.
but you have to understand risk, and you have to define it as a business first off. So, like when we work with customers, for instance, we're oftentimes doing workshops around, all right, well, how are you understanding, what makes your business money? Because to your
Mhm.
point, Jensen, that's the ultimate goal of a business is to make money, right? Like we're all in it to make sure the business is healthy, that way people keep having jobs and everything keeps going forward in a really nice human centric way.
Right.
And with that, The second job of a business is to protect that money. So that's why when you look at digital security, everything that we do nowadays has a digital element to it, right? So the topic is number one, principally relevant inside of rooms that you and I probably don't have privilege or access to get into. But
Mm,
people are asking the questions around how secure are we? How do we understand how much debt there is in these vulnerabilities that are associated with us? And that's really the thing that makes us super unique over here over at Phoenix is we've figured out a way to truly show an impactful way to from a board level perspective around, hey, here's what this is costing you as from a business perspective to keep maintaining it. And what that's allowing people to do is start to ask questions like, hey, what do we do with this? Do we invest money in this? Do we sunset it all together and rebuild it from scratch using brand new state of the art, technology like from Red Hat or whoever, right? I
mhm.
mean, there's so many other questions that people want to be answering, but they all want to understand what level of risk is that going to pose to our business? How do we accept it? How do we mitigate it? How do we deny it if we're not good with it, right? But all these CVEs and CWEs, they stack up to something and they're associated with real life impacts around how businesses operate, right? So like quantifying that to people is important, but quantifying it in a way that makes sense, that's where a lot of people lack out in that whole scanner community you were talking about.
Mm,
And
mhm.
and I think it's funny, right? Because if you look at it, everyone was focused for the past 5 6 years on really getting as much signal as they possibly could. Like, let's just get as much accurate signal as we can to see our digital estates.
Right.
Now it's like, hey man, our digital estates are sometimes often massive and they are ever changing and ephemeral in nature in terms of how they operate, right? Like these are new ways that people are trying to infiltrate businesses through these ways and all these sorts of things.
Well, yeah, and it's sort of what you're talking about makes me think of like this whole pursuit for S bombs, for example, right?
Sure.
Like everyone wanted S bombs; these things were being mandated and whatnot. And I was always asking, like, well, what are you going to do with them? If you have like an estate of like 17,000 assets, and you have 17,000, maybe similar but probably unique S bombs, like, what are you actually doing with this stuff, right? Like,
Right.
there's a purpose behind it, but I think for a lot of people, it's like ticking a box. And the
Well,
same way, a lot of these like scanners right now, or the way that we assess risk in these environments, is basically looking for vulnerabilities, and that's it. Like just vulnerabilities in software, not misconfigurations, not weak other weaknesses that might be there, but actual software vulnerabilities. And we never really stop to look at what are the other things that are there, because when we're looking at, say, a vulnerability in software in a container or whatever, like that container itself may not be literally exposed to the internet.
no.
The entire innards of the container certainly aren't exposed to the internet. There's like one ingress point if you're using it properly. And so, what is that thing that's actually listening to network traffic that might be exposed? And we never really stop to look at like what are all these interconnected parts, because it's hard, right? You've got like architecture reviews, you got all this design stuff that you have to do to understand how things are actually being used, to actually understand where your weaknesses are. And it
Mhm.
sounds to me like those are the sorts of things that you and this new wave of we'll call it risk mitigation or risk management, exposure therapy, let's call it that, right?
Oh, that.
Are trying to provide, right?
Well, I would say yes to that, but I would take it a little further because I think the ultimate question that people are trying to answer when they look at these vulnerabilities and when an AppSec guy ships a developer, hey, you've got this critical vulnerability and it's running, right? Like there's always a conversation behind that, first off.
Mhm.
Second off, people want to answer the question of what does this mean to my business, right? Like, yes, to your point, like, is it even reachable? But what if I could tell you, yes, it's reachable, it's weaponizable, it's being used in the wild by known threat actors and threat adversaries to take ransomware victims hostage? What if I could give you that piece of information? That helps me make a proactive, more informed decision on what I fix first, meaning, hey, if someone does have access to something that can get to our crown jewels, we should probably fix that. But as a business, you need to understand what that stuff is. You need to take inventory. You need to have, I hate to say, a clean CMDB because that's a joke,
Right.
but
Yep.
but my point is I don't know. you need to be able to understand what to fix and why it matters to your business. And
Well, and
that's
I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like you're talking about prioritizing those things that actually matter. And
yes,
you might find that a vulnerability with a high CVSS, whatever, that's not actually exposed is probably less impactful for you than a lower rated vulnerability or a misconfiguration that doesn't have a CV label. And that is the sort of thing that should be exposed and you should actually fix first. But if
well,
all you're doing is looking for CVs and mapping by CVSS scores, that thing that's actually risky is the thing that you're missing.
you're completely accurate because you're not taking into account EPSS, even though there's missing elements and flaws in EPSS, but there's other
Mhm.
vectors to take into account of how vulnerable something truly is and what the actual score is, because you get these competing sources of information around what something is, but who do you really trust, right? What tool do you really trust? What has the most visibility and the reachability inside of something to say, look, what is this that we're even examining in the first place? How do we understand it as it relates to the business that you have told it, right? Like that's the nuance to Phoenix that I think a lot of people love from our customer base, is the fact that they can, tell Phoenix, hey, it's this important to me from an app perspective. It's my finance front end. I care about it the most. Well, I want to know about vulnerabilities that hit that stuff first, right? I want to know, hey, what's going to impact my revenue generating activity.
Right. So you're kind of looking at it in a way of labeling things. It makes me think of the CVSS environmental metrics, right? Where you kind of like rate things differently based on dev or QE or production. And then even in production, there's different levels of criticality, right? Maybe my email server going down, like it's annoying, right? Emails get bounced, delayed, delivered later. If I'm a bank, I probably care less about my email going down than I do about my web front
Um,
end going down where people are doing their transactions, right?
Correct. Right. And that's something that you want to be able to understand from a vulnerability perspective, because like let's look, there will always be software vulnerabilities, right? Like I
Of
think
course.
I think we're at the stage where we can all say that's fine, but if you can get to stuff that, man, it here's what matters to us to fix and here's what matters to the business and how much to fix, that gives
Mhm.
you so much from an actual, like, let's move the needle conversation, not just a theoretical eat the elephant one bite at a time. It's no, hey, how do we maybe take a log for shell or whatever and eradicate it from the environment one team at a
Yep.
time, or whatever that
Yep.
is for the next heartbleed moment, call it. I think the overall goal of the people that are in the space like me is to try to get to a proactive state. And what I mean by that is, when the people that have to report on risk digitally, our CISO friends and our SVP friends that have to go into boardrooms and address their peers in ways that are really difficult to understand, we want to give them something that says, look, here's what it is, and more importantly, here's what we're doing to take care of the problem already, right? Because like the end goal is to remediate things, but I
Yep.
think the end goal is to remediate things before the board even really starts to know about it. And to do that, you have to not only orchestrate the right tooling and everything else, but the right people and the processes behind that first and foremost. You have to have something like, in Phoenix we call it a blast radius analysis, where I can say, man, where is this thing and how affected am I? What environments are affected? What teams are affected? What business units are affected? These are all things that people want to understand in real time moments of threats. And that's what we're seeing in real life, right? Like the threats are increasing, they're
Yes.
not slowing down, and the average business is going to eventually get hit by something. So, where are they going to come in, and what they're going to target? I mean, we all know, and there's a lot of research on Phoenix Security just to back this up. But take a read at the threat centric research that we've done. It's incredible. But my point is, there are people that are trying to exploit these things. There are people that are trying to take advantage of holes in software, in healthcare systems, in finance systems. And yeah, I think it's high time that people are paying attention to what are we fixing and why does it matter to the business versus what are we just arbitrarily fixing.
Oh, 100%. Because I think that right now, it's a combination of lack of prioritization, right? Like, because we don't understand what it is that we should be chasing after. And we'll always be playing whack a mole. Like, we always will. And I mean, to your earlier point about like what our businesses exist for, like they exist to create revenue, serve customers that ultimately create that revenue, right? The business model that nobody has is to like perpetually patch vulnerabilities.
To fix stuff.
That's
No,
you
that's
fix it so that you can enable your business to make money.
yeah. What's the average developer cost these days? And you're asking him to spend his time fixing stuff? Like, good, get out of here. He's supposed to be thinking and innovating and doing all the fun stuff that those people are brilliantly capable of doing, right?
That
Like,
generate value.
yes, correct, 100%. Versus how do we just look at all this signal all the time? And that's why I say Phoenix aggregates those things and why there's this other class of us out there that truly we're in the vulnerability management space in general, the unification of that,
Mhm.
because that's the stuff we're talking about is how do you take a modern vulnerability management approach toward threats and how do you report on the stuff toward people that don't understand IT? Because like it or not, there's a lot of those people that don't understand a single thing that we say when we talk about, well, this container is not in runtime and it's not even accessible via the internet, and they're like, wait, what?
Oh, 100%. This is actually a conversation I have with my folks quite often, right? Like you might have something that's technically elegant, technically precise, meaningful to another engineer, but the recipient of that information, say it's a description for a CV or something, right? It's not an engineer. Right? Like they don't care. They're like, okay, if a patch is available, I'll apply it and I'll move on. Right? Like that's not my thing. It's the auditors, it's the CIOs, it's the CISOs, it's the ones who want to actually understand something. They're looking at going like, I need a PhD in C++ to understand this thing,
Yeah, yeah.
and they don't. Right? Like so, yeah, it could be technically accurate. You could be 100% reporting on all these vulnerabilities that exist, but if you don't translate that into a way that somebody who has to take action understands what action they have to take and where to prioritize their finite resources and time and money, then they're going to be whacking the wrong moles and
Completely agree.
end up being breached, right? Because I always find it interesting. Like we're always chasing this zero CVE, like this is the thing that's going to fix everything if we get ourselves and our environments down to zero CVs. And yet I keep watching the number of breaches that we have reported. It just keeps going up. So if that was the solution, this should be coming down, and it's not.
There's a lot of really good research out there as well that's not in favor of AI supporting this whole thing too, meaning like the code that AI is generating is just as vulnerable as the human that is creating it too. So like we cannot trust that stuff to actually accelerate, development cycles and make it safer. You still need to go look at all these things. And more importantly, I think in the moment you need something that's going to be able to say like, based off of the given events that are happening currently to me, what are my biggest threats and what am I exposed to? And you need to be able to answer those questions.
Yeah.
You need to be able to speak more intelligently about the holes in your business and where those patches need to be applied because like every ship is sinking. It's not that they aren't. It's just where are you plugging holes, right? And to your point, some are bigger than others, and some are just not known to others, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Hey, listen, thanks so much, Phil, for hopping on here and having this discussion with me. I think it's super helpful for myself and for other people to understand like counting CVs is not the way of the future when the actual goal that everybody has is protecting their business and eliminating the risk of a breach. And the things that we were doing before aren't necessarily the things that are going to help us in the future because, like you said, the threats keep going up. There's more software, ergo, there's more vulnerabilities in software, and all of these things that the tried and tested things of the 90s or the 2000s, right, that we thought was good practice, simply aren't the good practice that we thought they were in this ever changing and evolving environment. And don't even get me started on the AI pieces as well, right? So that's a whole other that's another Pandora's box too. So
you want again, we'll open that box and have that discussion. Thank you so
totally.
much for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with you again, and just if there's ever anything that I can do for you or spout off about my relentless need for better communication and operating models inside of the modern enterprise, just you know where to find me.
I do indeed. Thanks, Phil, so much. And thank you, everyone else, for watching.